Welcome back to the channel. I was correct. Delaware was the next state on our list. I have checked this time. Florida will be after Delaware. So, anyway, let's get into Delaware. Delaware is called the first state often because they were the first state to ratify the Constitution December 7th, 1787, which makes them the first state to join the United States. The capital of Delaware is Dover. It has a population of roughly 1 million, just over 1 million people. I've seen some different things. It may have gone down below 1 million because, and I think we'll get into that in the trivia section. So I'll try to remember that for later. But it's around the 45th in terms of population as far as states go. I did see some things online that declared Delaware to be the least populous state, but in looking, Wyoming has far fewer people than Delaware, so Delaware is not the least populous state. They're around 40s. So it depends on the census numbers and when you're looking and all that stuff. But the most reliable number I saw was 45th as far as population goes. In area, they're between, and this is weird, I don't know why they're between these two measurements, between 1,982 and 2,489 square miles. It doesn't make any sense to me. But that makes them the 49th smallest state. There's only one state that is smaller than Delaware. And if you look at the map there that I've got on the screen, that tiny little red spot, that's Delaware. So yeah, not very big. The capital of Delaware is Dover. And the largest cities in Delaware are Wilmington, Dover, Newark, and Middleton. In fact, Delaware was named after the first governor of Virginia. Yeah, I don't know. He must have been prominent in Delaware as well, but he was Sir Thomas West, Lord Delaware. So that's where we get Delaware from. In the history of Delaware, it was first settled in 1631 by the Dutch. I'm not even going to try to pronounce that. But within a year, all the settlers were killed in disputes with natives. The Swedes came next. They established New Sweden, and that was first established in Fort Christina, which is near Wilmington. The Dutch returned in 1651, and they established a fort at what is present-day Newcastle. The Dutch annexed the Swedish colony into New Netherlands. The area was subsequently claimed from the Dutch by the English. And ownership passed to James, the Duke of York. This is the one that New York is named after. And then York then gave Delaware to William Penn, who was the founder of Pennsylvania. And for several years, Delaware was actually part of Pennsylvania. They split apart eventually, but they both had at the same time, the governor of Pennsylvania was still the governor of Delaware, even though they were officially recognized as separate colonies at that point in time. So, whoa, too far. Delaware, it was highly dependent initially on slavery, on slave labor, and they grew tobacco. It's kind of interesting that the change from slavery to a highly industrialized society that came up later, but they were, like I said, they were highly dependent on slave labor at the time. And they were one of the slave states that did not secede from the Union. And by the end of the war, most African Americans in the state, there were far greater numbers of African Americans in the state who were free as opposed to who were in slavery, even at the time of the Civil War. So it's interesting in that regard. The American Revolution, they sent the Delaware Blues, aka the Blue Hens Chicks, to fight with the Continental Army, or fight on behalf of Delaware for the Continental Army. They were mostly under control of the British throughout the American Revolution. And once again, as I said, with the Civil War, Delaware actually voted against secession and remained with the Northern Free States. And kind of an interesting thing, there were several states that sided with the North that still had units that were mustered out from their state that joined the Confederate Army. Delaware was not one of those. So even though Delaware was a slave state at the time and voted to remain in the Union, there were no units from Delaware who fought with the Confederate Army, interestingly enough. They did reject the 13th Amendment, which abolished slavery, although they eventually did ratify that in 1901. And then industrialization really changed the Delaware and their politics and things. It's kind of interesting. One of the quotes that I came across when I was looking up some of the Delaware history, and at the moment I don't want to try to go find it, but one of the quotes around the time of the Civil War was that Delaware was the first state to join the Union and it would be the last to leave it. So, as I said, they voted against leaving the Union. Politics changed steadily after the Civil War. There was still segregation, but and this is one of the things that maybe gets downplayed, especially in politics today, but it was through a large part, it was the efforts of the Republicans that actually got rid of segregation in Delaware. Republican backing and industry backing. The industry didn't care. The industry was like, I don't care who works for me. As long as I'm making money, I'm happy. So I don't care. And because of that, the Republicans were able to come in and influence politics, but it was also backed by the industry that came into Delaware after the Civil War, that these restrictions were abolished. Interestingly enough, in World War II, one of the largest suppliers of gunpowder to the United States, to the Army, was Delaware. Yeah. Who knew? So, climate and geography of Delaware. It's part of the Atlantic coastal plain, so it's mostly flat. Flat, sandy, and in some parts, swampy. It's hillier as you move towards the western part of the state, but it's still surrounded pretty much on that part of the land they're on is surrounded on both sides by water. Although Delaware only occupies a sliver, as you saw from that first map, of that peninsula. So towards the center of the state, towards the west end of the state, it gets hillier. It's it has a humid subtropical climate. And in the winter, it's between 20 degrees and 35 degrees Fahrenheit, which is negative 6.7 and up to 1.7 degrees Celsius. In the summer, it goes from 69 degrees to 86 degrees Fahrenheit. And again, this is average temperature. This is not their highs and lows. This is average temperatures in this range, which is 21 degrees to 30 degrees Celsius. I forgot to mention that the highest point in Delaware is Ebright Azimuth. I think that's how you say it. It's near Concord High School, and it is less than 450 feet above sea level. And that's it's 140 meters basically above sea level. So it's very, very flat for a state. Industry in Delaware. They have quite a large agriculture industry for being such a small state. They also have finance and insurance, science and technology, manufacturing, and education and healthcare. Some of the largest companies in the agricultural area are Belcham Crop Protection, Corteva AgriScience, Dot Foods. Finance, we have J.P. Morgan Chase, Capital One, Bank of America. In science and technology, BASF, Chemours, Adhesive, and then in manufacturing, Miller Metal Fabrication, ILC Dover, DuPont. DuPont actually, the company DuPont and the DuPont family are huge in Delaware. In fact, the DuPont company started in Delaware. Branching out into education and healthcare, we have Bay Health, BB Healthcare, and Delaware State University are all part of that. The industry there in Delaware. In tourism, there's a lot of beaches, state parks, and various tourist attractions. As far as that goes, Cape Henlopen State Park, Delaware Seashore State Park, Fenwick Island State Park, Trap Pond State Park, all part of the beaches. There's also the beaches and state parks in there. There's also the Air Mobility Command Museum. Funland is an amusement park there in Delaware. There's the Nemours Estate, the Hagley Museum and Library, Winterthur Museum, and Winterthur Museum Garden and Library. So these are some of the bigger tourist attractions in the area. As far as trivia goes, let's get into that. The state marine animal is the horseshoe crab. Apparently, in Delaware, you can go down to the beaches and stuff and just see horseshoe crabs as far as the eye can see. They're everywhere. The Dover Downs, it's a it's a racetrack for race cars. Excuse me. It's so big you can fit the entire populations of Dover, Rehoboth Beach, Newark, Middleton, and Delaware City into Dover Downs. And if you remember, Middleton, Newark, and Dover are all some of the biggest cities, 3 of the biggest cities. I'd have to check Rehoboth Beach. I don't remember if I put that down as one of the biggest. I put the 4 biggest cities on. In fact, let's go back up to the facts. So Wilmington, Dover, Newark, and Middleton. So basically, this racetrack is so big and those cities are so small that the 3 of the 4 biggest cities, their entire population can fit inside this racetrack. And that's just in the stands. You can still do it's not like you're filling it. It's the stands. There are 200 times more chickens than people in Delaware. Delaware has no sales tax. So a lot of people actually will go shopping in Delaware from other places so that they don't have to pay sales tax. Kevlar, which was invented by, if I remember right, DuPont. Kevlar was invented in Delaware. It is the lowest state, being 60 feet above sea level, 18 meters. And there is a law in Delaware that pawnbrokers may not accept wooden legs. You can't use them as at a pawn shop. Delaware is, as I said before, Delaware is not the least populous state, even though there are places that where I found online that said it was. It may have been at one time. Sorry about that. But it is no longer. The Punkin Chunkin World Championship is held in Delaware. And if you are not familiar with Punkin Chunkin, I'm not surprised, because it's pumpkin chuckin' or pumpkin throwing contest. Pumpkin being the large orange fruit that people here in the United States have around Thanksgiving and Christmas. They bake into pies, all that kind of stuff. Yes, that. It is a... I don't know where pumpkin chunkin' came from, but that's the official name. And what they do is they build machines and they try to launch pumpkins as far as they can with these machines. So they have different categories. They have different types of machines. They'll have catapults, trebuchets. They'll have things like this, the image that you see on the screen here. This is probably a pneumatic cannon. So it uses air pressure to try to fire the pumpkin as far as it can go. There's over 100 teams that compete at this competition, and the current record for throwing or launching a pumpkin the farthest is 5,545 feet, so 1,690 kilometers. So yeah, and yeah, Henry Heimlich, the man who invented the Heimlich maneuver, is from Delaware. Joe Biden was current president of the United States. I'm not sure if he was born in Delaware or if he just served in the Delaware Congress. I took it to mean when I was looking it up that he was born there, but let me double check. No, he's born in Scranton, Pennsylvania, but he served in Delaware. He was the United States Senator for Delaware from 1973 to 2009. There are more businesses, incorporated businesses in Delaware than there are citizens, and Bob Marley used to live here. So it was before he became famous. He was working for the DuPont company and then later for the Chrysler assembly plant in Newark. So he was, manual labor. I shouldn't say manual labor, but he was not then a famous singer, obviously, but he was just employed by the DuPont company and then Chrysler later. So if you have any questions about Delaware, please let me know down in the comments. Like and subscribe as always. Put the bell on to get notifications. And until next time, have fun.